After 11 years of marriage, I found out my wife was living a second life, with a fake name and another family in a different town. I never thought I'd be the kind of guy to post something like this. I'm not great with words, and I don't usually share personal stuff online. But I've been sitting with this for weeks now, and it's eating me alive. So here goes. My name's Rick. I'm 38 years old. I work in HVAC. Been married to my wife, Sarah, for going on 11 years. We don't have kids, never got around to it, I guess. Life just sort of rolled on. We have a little house in a quiet Ohio neighborhood. Nothing fancy, but it's ours. Or it was anyway. This all started 6 weeks ago. It was cold, middle of February. I was out in the garage, fixing the damn leaf blower that hadn't worked since fall. I needed a screwdriver, so I went digging through one of the old junk drawers we keep in the corner. You know the kind, random batteries, receipts, broken chargers, loose nails, stuff that doesn't belong anywhere else. That's when I found it. A phone. Not hers. Not mine. A phone I'd never seen before. Tucked way in the back, underneath an old receipt from an oil change dated last summer. At first, I thought maybe it was an old one she forgot about. But when I pressed the power button, it lit up. Fully charged. Newer model. Locked screen. Just one notification showing. See you next weekend, A. I just stared at it. My stomach dropped like I missed a step on the stairs. The wallpaper wasn't a picture of us. It was a picture of her. Just her. Taken somewhere I didn't recognize. She was smiling, not the fake smile she gives for Christmas cards. This one was real. Too real. I didn't know what to do. I didn't open it. I just stood there in the cold garage, staring at that message. That one damn message. I waited until she went to bed that night. Then I tried every code I could think of. Her birthday. Our anniversary. Nothing worked. But the phone kept lighting up. More messages. Counting down the days. You make me feel alive again. Delete this. Please. That's when I knew. This wasn't some misunderstanding. This wasn't an old phone. This was something else. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't confront her. I didn't yell or cry or do any of the things you'd think a guy might do when he finds out his wife is probably cheating. I just sat there, in the dark, holding a phone that didn't belong to me, and wondering how long my marriage had been a lie. After I found the phone, everything changed. Not on the outside at first. The dishes still got done. The dog still needed to be let out. We still sat down for dinner together like we always did. She asked how my day was, and I lied. Said it was fine. She smiled, and I smiled back. But something inside me had shifted. Something quiet, but heavy. Like a pressure in the chest that won't go away. I started watching her differently. Not in a creepy way, just paying attention. Listening. Noticing. She was texting more than usual. Turning the screen away when I walked by. She'd step outside to take a call that didn't ring first. She laughed more when she thought I wasn't in the room. And it's wild, because once you suspect someone's lying to you, everything feels like a lie. You start questioning everything they say, every place they go, every be right back, and just need some air, turns into a blinking red light. I started tracking her routine, quietly. I'm not proud of it, but I wrote things down. When she left, where she said she was going, how long she was gone. I even checked her odometer a few times, just to see if the numbers added up. They didn't. A few nights later, she said she was going to the store. Told me she was picking up stuff for dinner. I asked if she wanted me to go with her. She hesitated just for a second, then said no. That was the first real moment I knew. She didn't want me there. She came back an hour and a half later with one grocery bag. A single bag. Inside were pasta, sauce, and a bottle of wine, the kind she knows I don't drink. Said the store was busy. Said she ran into someone from work. Smiled. Kissed me on the cheek. I smiled back. Said nothing. And in that moment, I felt like a ghost in my own house. Like I was standing in a life that used to belong to me, but someone else was living it now. Someone I didn't recognize. Someone who could look me in the eye, tell me a story, and walk away like nothing happened. But I didn't confront her. Not yet. I needed to know everything first. I wanted truth, not anger. Facts, not feelings. So I made a decision that night. I was going to find out exactly who A was, and what my wife had been doing every second weekend for the past 4 years. It happened by accident. I'd been trying for days to crack the passcode on the second phone. I wasn't even sure why. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was desperation. I told myself I wanted closure, something concrete. But really, I just needed proof that I wasn't crazy. Then one night, everything changed. She had fallen asleep on the couch. Wine glass in hand. TV still playing one of those true crime shows she always watches. I stood there for a minute watching her breathe. She looked peaceful.
Familiar.
But also like a stranger I'd only just met. I reached for the phone in my jacket pocket. Held it up. Face ID. It unlocked on the first try. I froze. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might wake her up. But she didn't move. I sat down in the hallway and started going through it, one screen at a time. The first thing I saw was a text thread with someone saved as A. Just a single letter. No last name.
No emoji.
Nothing cute. Just. The thread was long. It went back years. This wasn't a fling. This wasn't someone she met on a trip or at a bar. This was something else. Structured. Regular. Hidden. They had routines. Weekly calls. Private codes. Shared memories. He talked to her like she was his partner, his one and only. And she replied like nothing else existed outside that little bubble they had created. One message stood out. Long day ahead. Won't be able to text much. Another. Leaving now. Should be there by 8. Miss you. And then this one. Can't wait to fall asleep next to you again. There were photos. One of her sitting on a porch I'd never seen before. Holding a mug. Bundled in a sweater she never wore at home. Another of her cooking in a small kitchen. Laughing. A kind of laugh I hadn't heard in years. And then I saw the picture that broke something in me. She was standing beside him. His arm around her waist. Her head tilted toward him, like it belonged there. On her left hand a ring. Not our ring. Different band. Different stone. Same finger. She had another life. A second home. A man who thought she was his. There were no mentions of me.
No es lipu PS.
No signs that he knew I even existed. She was careful. Every word she sent him was built on the lie that she was his, and only his. That night, I sat in the dark for hours, scrolling through years of my wife's second life. And when I finally looked back toward the living room, she was still asleep, curled up like nothing had changed. But everything had. Because now I knew. She wasn't just cheating. She had another husband. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the kitchen until sunrise, staring at the second phone, wondering how many other truths had been buried under the life I thought we were building together. 11 years of marriage. And I didn't know who she really was. I made coffee at 5 a.m., poured it into the mug she got me for our 5th anniversary. The one that says, "Best husband ever." And I almost laughed. Almost. That morning, when she woke up, she was sweet. Casual. Said she slept like a rock. Kissed me on the cheek. Made toast. No sign that she had any idea her world was starting to fall apart. I watched her butter her toast like it was any other day. And in my head I kept repeating the same question. Who are you? When she left for work, I sat down at my computer. I opened the photos from the second phone and started reverse image searching anything that showed a house, a street sign, a business name in the background. It didn't take long. One of the images showed a man standing next to her. In the corner of the frame, blurry but readable, was the name of a coffee shop. I looked it up. Small place in a town 3 hours away. Population under 10,000. I cross-referenced the name she used in her texts. It wasn't Sarah. She was going by Emily. I found a Facebook profile. Brand new, only about 2 years old. But there she was. Same face. Different last name. Married. To him. He wasn't just a boyfriend. He was her second husband. No wedding photos, but they had check-ins together, mutual friends, posts from their weekend getaways. All public. I looked through every photo, every comment. And the entire time all I could think was, how long has this been going on? How many people has she lied to? I found a real estate record. She had co-signed a lease on a property with him. Small brick house. I recognized it from the pictures. She had a home with this man. Furniture. Dishes. A dog. I sat back in my chair, heart racing, trying to process it. This wasn't an affair. This wasn't a side thing or some emotional connection that got out of hand. She had 2 husbands, 2 names, 2 lives, and she had kept both of us completely in the dark. That day I didn't eat. I didn't talk to anyone. I just sat with the weight of it. Knowing the woman I loved was a stranger. Knowing she was waking up in another town, in another bed, pretending that life was real too. And for the first time since this all began, I didn't feel angry. I felt erased. I waited 3 more days. 3 days of pretending, smiling when she walked in the room, asking about her day like I actually cared about the answer, sleeping next to her while knowing she was slipping away to someone else every other weekend. I was waiting for the right moment. Not to explode. I didn't want a scene. I didn't want to give her the satisfaction of seeing me shattered. I wanted clarity, real answers, a crack in her mask. And then the moment came. It was a Sunday night. She had just gotten back from one of her work seminars. Same suitcase, same lie. She kissed me hello, like always, and walked into the bedroom. I followed her in and sat on the edge of the bed while she unpacked. Calm, still. Where'd you go this time? I asked. She didn't even look up. Columbus. You know that. No, I said. I don't think I do. She paused. Just for a second. Barely noticeable, but it was there. That flicker of hesitation. The gears in her head shifting. Then she turned toward me, smiled like nothing was wrong and said, "Babe, what's going on?" I reached into the drawer of my nightstand and pulled out the second phone. Her face drained instantly. Not just surprise, fear. I held it up. "You left it in the garage, tucked behind a box of drill bits. Not a great hiding spot." She didn't move, didn't reach for it, didn't speak. I know about the other name, the other house, the man in the pictures. My voice was steady. I know everything. Silence. She sat down slowly on the edge of the bed, across from me. Still no words. So I kept going. "You've been married to him for what, 2 years? 3? I found the lease. I saw the photos. I saw you. The version of you he knows. The version that laughs like it still means something." She finally spoke. Her voice was low, careful. "How long have you known?" I didn't answer. Because the question wasn't, "Why did I do it?" It wasn't, "I'm sorry." It was, "How long have you known?" Like that was the part that mattered. Like she was still trying to figure out how much control she had left. That told me everything. I stood up. "I'm not going to yell," I said. "I'm not going to break anything or cry or ask you why. I don't even care what the answer is anymore. But I need you to understand something." She looked up at me, eyes glossy but dry. "Waiting. You're not who I married. You never were. And now I get to decide who I am, without you." Then I set the phone on the nightstand and walked out of the room. She didn't follow me. She didn't say a word. The silence said enough. After the confrontation, I stayed at my brother's place for a few days. She didn't call, didn't text, didn't try to explain. That silence felt louder than anything she could have said. It confirmed what I already knew. Her story was over. At least with me. But there was one part one couldn't let go of. Him. The man on the other side of the mirror she built. The man who looked at her the same way I used to. Who probably thought he'd found the love of his life too. I had his name. I had the town. And after a little digging, I had an address. I didn't go there to start a fight. I'm not that guy. I needed to look him in the eye. I needed to see what she saw in him, and maybe what she stopped seeing in me. So I drove 3 hours on a gray Thursday afternoon. Middle of nowhere. Quiet streets. One of those towns where every mailbox is perfectly painted and the dogs don't bark when strangers pull up. His house was small. Brick. Clean. The same one from the photo. I sat in my truck for 15 minutes before I got the nerve to knock. He answered the door like he'd just gotten off work. Jacket still on, keys in his hand. Late 30s. Average build. Looked like the kind of guy who knew how to fix things around the house. His expression shifted the second he saw me. Not recognition, confusion. "Can I help you?" I didn't know how to start. There's no manual for this kind of thing. So I just said, "I think we need to talk. About Emily." His face changed instantly. Not shock. Not anger. Something worse, doubt. Like his entire foundation cracked right beneath him. "I'm sorry. Do I know you?" he asked. I nodded. "You don't. But I know you. At least, I know who she is when she's here." He stepped out onto the porch, shut the door behind him. His hands were shaking. "I don't understand," he said. And so I told him. Not everything. Not all at once. Just enough to get past the confusion. "She's my wife," I said quietly. "Her real name is Sarah." He just stood there, still, like someone hit pause on his whole body. Then quietly, "No, she's my wife." We both stared at each other. Two men, two strangers, bound by the same woman and the same lie. I don't know how long we stood there like that. The wind picked up. A dog barked somewhere in the distance. He finally sat down on the porch step like his knees just gave out. I sat next to him. Neither of us spoke for a while. And when we did, the only thing he said was, "How long?" His name is Daniel. He's 41. Works in construction. Lives quiet. Divorced once before. He met her, Emily as he knew her, 3.5 years ago at a hardware store. "She asked me which paint to use for kitchen cabinets," he told me. "I thought I was helping a stranger pick out primer. Didn't know I was volunteering for a role in someone else's play." We sat in his kitchen for hours, talking, listening, filling in the gaps of each other's lives. We started comparing timelines, trips, holidays, weekends, birthdays. Her lies were airtight. She always had a reason to be gone. A business trip, a family emergency, a work retreat. Every detail rehearsed. Every excuse wrapped in just enough truth to make it believable. She said her parents lived out of state and that they were sick, Daniel said. I offered to go with her once. She got cold. Said they were private people. Told me not to ask again. That was the first time he felt something was off. He showed me a drawer where she kept personal things. Birthday cards. Old Polaroids. Notes. Some from him, some from people he didn't know. A few were in handwriting that wasn't hers. Then he pulled out something strange. A stack of letters. They weren't addressed to anyone.
No envelopes.
Just pages, folded and rubber banded together. Handwritten. We opened one. It started like this. I don't know who I am when I'm with him, but I know I feel safer. Another. Sometimes I wonder if I could disappear completely. Start over. Erase it all. Some of the letters sounded like she was talking about me. Others about Daniel. And a few, like she was writing to someone else entirely. A third man? Or maybe no one at all. Maybe it was just her trying to make sense of her own mess. In secret. But there was one line I'll never forget. I've told so many versions of the truth that I don't think I'd recognize the real one if it stood in front of me. That one hit us both hard. Daniel got quiet after that. We sat in silence. The letters spread out on the table like puzzle pieces we weren't sure how to fit together. She told me she couldn't have kids, he said suddenly. Did she tell you that? I nodded. Yeah, same. He rubbed his face like he was trying to scrub her out of his mind. I believed her. I even told my mom not to ask about grandkids. We both laughed. Not because it was funny, because if we didn't, we might break. That night, when I got back to my truck, I didn't drive home. I just sat there in the dark, reading the copies I'd made of those letters, and wondering how many more lies she'd written, and who else she'd written them for. When I got home the next morning, the house was quiet. Too quiet. No shoes by the door. No coat on the hook. The fridge was emptier than it should have been. A few hangers in the closet were bare, and the bathroom drawers had that oddly neat look. Like someone took just what they needed and left everything else behind. She was gone. No note. No message. No warning. I called her phone, both of them. Straight to voicemail. Texted. Nothing. I checked her emails, her social media. Everything had gone dark. Accounts deactivated. Photos erased. Like she'd never existed. The only trace left behind was a single charge on our joint account. An ATM withdrawal for $600. Made at a gas station off the interstate the night before. I called Daniel. Same story. He hadn't heard from her since I left his house. She was supposed to come back that weekend. She never showed. Her things were missing. Her phone off. No friends could reach her. That's when the fear crept in. Not anger. Not heartbreak. Fear. Because for all her lies, she was always careful. Calculated. She kept things separated, protected. She didn't just disappear without a plan. But this felt rushed. Sloppy. Like something or someone had pushed her. I started looking deeper. Opened her laptop. Checked her browsing history, her emails, her notes app. She had deleted most of it, but people always leave something behind. And she had. There was a folder buried in her files. Hidden inside another folder marked Work Budget 2020. Inside were PDFs. Bank transfers. Wire instructions. A fake name I'd never seen before. And dates. Transactions made to an account I didn't recognize. Spaced out over months. Small amounts at first, a few hundred here, 1,000 there. But the last few? For $5,000 at a time. She was moving money. Not just spending it. Hiding it. And it wasn't just our account. It was Daniel's too. When I told him, he went pale. Said he hadn't even noticed. She managed the finances, paid the bills, ran the house. He never checked. She was bleeding both of us dry. And then came the final clue. Daniel's mailbox. That week, he got a letter addressed to her alias. No return address. Inside was a single page, typed, not signed. It said, "If anyone comes asking, you don't know me. You don't know her. Delete everything." We took it to the police. They asked us some questions. Took our statements. Promised to look into it. But you could tell from their tone. They thought she just ran off. That we were a couple of gullible guys who got played and were now licking our wounds. And maybe that was true. But the thing is, this didn't feel like a clean getaway. This felt like a vanishing act under pressure. And for the first time, I wondered, who else was looking for her? A week passed. Still no sign of her.
No texts.
No calls. No charges on the bank accounts. No online activity. She was gone like smoke. Vanished into the cracks of her own lies. Daniel and I kept in touch daily. Two men tied together by one ghost. We'd started calling it the file. That growing pile of documents, photos, records, and names that she left behind, or maybe wanted us to find. I couldn't tell anymore. Then something broke the silence. A letter arrived at my house, addressed to Sarah J. Adams. Not my last name. Not Daniel's either. Postmarked from Illinois. No return address. Inside was a bill, unpaid, for a storage unit in a town neither of us had ever been to. It was in her name. One of her names. There was a unit number. A small key taped to the invoice, and a handwritten note in the corner. If you're reading this, I waited too long. That was it. I drove out there 2 days later. Daniel met me halfway. It was a small facility just off a rural highway. Not one of those modern, gated places. Just rows of faded orange doors behind a rusted chain-link fence. The kind of place where people leave things they don't want found. We unlocked the unit and opened it. Inside, silence. And then dust. Boxes stacked chest-high. Plastic bins. A few pieces of mismatched furniture. One of those old portable safes you get at office supply stores. It looked untouched, but nothing about it felt forgotten. We pulled the boxes out one by one, laying everything across the gravel like an open crime scene. There were photo albums, none of me, none of Daniel. Just her. As a child, then a teenager, then older. Different towns. Different hair. Always the same eyes. There were old documents. A birth certificate under the name Elena Brooks. A high school diploma from a school in Georgia. A library card from Arizona. And then we found it. A camcorder. Sony. The kind you had to charge to use. We took it back to Daniel's house and plugged it in. There was one tape inside. We pressed play. The screen flickered. Shaky footage. She was in a motel room, filming herself in the mirror. Hair longer, face younger. She looked nervous. She said nothing for a long time. Then finally, "This is just in case. If something ever happens to me. My name is not Sarah, or Emily, or any of the other ones. I was born Elena. I changed it in 2012 after everything. They'll tell you I lied, that I hurt people, but they don't know the whole story. And I couldn't keep running forever." The video cut off. No details.
No explanación.
Just enough to crack everything open again. We sat there, quiet, not sure if we were watching a confession or a warning. Daniel looked over at me and said the one thing I'd been too afraid to say out loud. "I don't think we were the only ones she was hiding from." It happened on a Tuesday. Rainy morning, sky low and gray. I'd just gotten home from work early. Some rich guy canceled his HVAC install last minute. Said he didn't like the humidity. Whatever. I took it as a sign to rest. I barely had time to take off my boots when I heard the knock at the door. Not a casual knock. Firm. Rhythmic. The kind of knock that carries authority. 2 men were standing there when I opened it. Suits, both of them. Mid-40s maybe. Calm expressions. Clean-cut, but not too clean. The one on the left spoke first. "Mr. Rick Sullivan?" I nodded. "We're with the bureau. May we come in?" I didn't ask which bureau. I didn't need to. You feel it when it's the FBI. It's like gravity shifts in the room. They showed their IDs. I let them in. They didn't sit. Just stood in the living room, scanning the space. Not with suspicion. More like they were confirming something they already knew. "We're here about your wife," the taller one said. I didn't respond. "We're aware of the situation," he continued. "We know she's missing, and we know you've been in contact with another individual, Daniel Griggs." I stiffened. They didn't ask. They told. I asked the only question I could think to ask. "What is she to you?" The shorter agent, more serious looking, took a small folder from his coat. "She's a person of interest in an ongoing investigation, possibly tied to multiple cases of identity fraud, financial crimes, and a prior case from 2012 that is still classified." Classified. That word hit like a punch to the ribs. They asked me a few questions. When I last saw her, what I knew about her movements, whether I'd come across any documents, recordings, unusual names. I lied at first, said I didn't know much, just that she'd left. But they weren't buying it. The tall one finally said, "Mr. Sullivan, this is not a domestic dispute. This is not about infidelity. This woman has been creating new identities across multiple states. Your marriage was part of a much larger pattern." I asked them why they hadn't arrested her. "She's good at disappearing," the shorter one said. "We had eyes on her in 2019. Then she vanished again. Until now." Then he added, almost like an afterthought, "We're not the only ones looking for her." I felt my throat tighten. What does that mean? They didn't answer. They just handed me a card and said, "If she contacts you, don't engage. Call this number. Immediately." And then they were gone.
No threats. No promises.
Just the weight of everything they didn't say. I called Daniel that night. Told him everything. He went quiet for a long time. Then he said, "So what are we now? Victims? Witnesses? Or just loose ends?" I didn't have an answer, but deep down I felt it. We were never supposed to find each other. Never supposed to compare notes. And now that we had, someone else would be coming. After the FBI left, I started sleeping with the hallway light on. Not because I thought she'd come back, but because I wasn't sure what I'd do if she did. It was quiet for days. No calls. No new bank activity. No new messages. Even Daniel, who'd been calling me daily since all this began, stopped texting as often. I think we were both holding our breath, waiting for something, anything, to move. Then it did. Daniel called me one night around 11:30. I could hear wind in the background, like he was outside. His voice was flat, but I could tell he was shaken. "She was spotted." I sat up in bed. "Where?" "A gas station." 40 miles from here. Yesterday morning. He texted me the security camera still. It was her. Hair shorter. Sunglasses. Hoodie pulled low. But I knew it. You don't forget the person who dismantled your life. She was alone. No car in the frame. Just her standing at the register, buying a water bottle and a pack of gum. She looked over her shoulder once, then down at her phone. And then she was gone. The timestamp was 6:13 a.m. She hadn't used any cards. Paid cash. No ID shown. She knew the cameras were there. Probably counted on it. Like she wanted someone to know she was still out there. I sent the footage to the FBI contact. Got no response. Daniel and I drove out there the next morning. Talked to the cashier. He barely remembered her. Said she looked tired. Didn't say much. Didn't smile. We searched every motel nearby. No sign. No alias matched. She'd vanished again. This time even faster. But she left something behind. At the gas station dumpster, tucked between two trash bags, a motel key card. Room 12. No logo. Just a white card with a red stripe. We drove to the closest no-name motel off the highway. It was the kind of place where no one asked questions and no one wanted answers. Room 12 was already cleaned out. Nothing in the drawers. Nothing in the trash. But taped under the sink, behind the drain pipe, was a flash drive in a Ziploc bag. No label. No explanation. We didn't open it right away. I think part of us didn't want to know what was on it. Another twist? A confession? A warning? That night, back at Daniel's place, we plugged it into an old laptop we didn't care about. Just in case. There was only one file. A video. 31 seconds long. No face. Just her voice. If you're watching this, I need you to stop. You're not going to find me. You're not supposed to. I didn't lie to hurt you. I lied to survive. If they find you, say nothing. You don't know me. You never did. The screen cut to black. End of message. That was 2 days ago. We haven't heard anything since. Not from her. Not from the FBI. And now there's this quiet between us. Me and Daniel. Like the calm right before something breaks loose. Because the more we try to let it go, the more it feels like she's still out there, watching. It had been almost a month since we last heard her voice. Since that video. Since the motel key and the warning and the quiet threat wrapped inside 31 seconds of goodbye. I was starting to let it fade. Or at least shove it into the corner of my mind where unsolved things go. That place you pretend doesn't exist until something drags it back into the light. That something came in the form of a man in a gray suit with the kind of haircut that screamed expensive but didn't say much else. He showed up on a Friday morning, knocking at my door with a leather folder and a name I hadn't heard out loud in weeks. Elena Brooks. My chest tightened. She left a will, he said, calm as if he were telling me the time. You and one other individual are named in it. Daniel Griggs. I stared at him. She's not dead. He blinked. We didn't say she was. But she prepared this document with my office 2 years ago under that name. She requested it be delivered only if she went fully dark for more than 30 consecutive days. That's what she called it. Fully dark. Of course she did. He handed me a sealed envelope and one for Daniel. Inside, a handwritten letter, a map with GPS coordinates, and the deed to a small plot of land in rural Pennsylvania. A place I'd never heard of. The letter was brief, detached. If you're reading this, I've burned the last bridge. I never meant to leave you like this, but I also never meant to stay. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect understanding. Just closure. What's buried there belongs to the truth. If you want it, it's yours.
No signature.
No details.
No apologies.
Daniel got the same letter, same map, same coordinates. So we went. 3 hours on the road. Back roads. Forests, fog that never seemed to lift. We parked where the road ended and hiked half a mile into a patch of trees so quiet it made your ears ring. At the edge of a clearing, half covered by moss and leaves, was a weathered wooden marker. No name, just a symbol carved into it, 2 overlapping circles. We dug, shovel after shovel of cold earth until we hit something solid, a waterproof container, wrapped in black plastic. Inside, documents. Dozens of them. Old passports. Newspaper clippings. Court transcripts. Police reports from 2012. And a photo, the first real clue of who she might have been before any of this. A burned-down house. Crime scene tape. And in the background, a girl, maybe 18, staring dead into the camera. It was her. Long before Sarah. Before Emily. Before Elena. Daniel picked up one of the reports. His hands were shaking. She was a witness, he said. I looked closer. Not just a witness. A survivor. There had been an arson. 3 people dead. 1 missing, a teenage girl. Listed as a runaway. Case never closed. Her real name was there. Not Sarah. Not Emily. Not Elena. Jenna Price. She'd been running ever since. And suddenly it all made sense. The lies. The paranoia. The vanishing act. She hadn't just been escaping us. She'd been escaping the life she left behind. There was silence after we opened that box.
No twist ending.
No dramatic music. Just truth, heavy, buried, and years too late. Her name was Jenna Price. She was 17 when everything fell apart. The documents and police reports told the story in pieces, but by the time Daniel and I finished reading through everything, we started to see the whole picture. Her father was abusive. Not just emotionally violent. Neighbors had called it in. Teachers had filed reports. Her mother tried to protect her, even left once. But she came back. They always do until they can't anymore. And then one night in 2012, the house burned down. 3 people died. Her father, her mother, her younger sister, and Jenna, the oldest daughter, disappeared. The fire was ruled as arson. The police believed it was deliberate. And since Jenna had vanished, they assumed it was her. No evidence. Just absence. And absence became guilt. But the thing is, she didn't run because she was guilty of setting the fire. She ran because she knew they'd pin it on her anyway. Because she'd been trying to escape for years. And this was her only shot. That first alias, Elena Brooks, was born out of fear. Then Sarah. Then Emily. She changed identities the way most people change phone numbers. She learned how to hide, how to adapt, how to disappear. And every time she started over, she created just enough of a story to seem normal. To avoid questions. To survive. But trauma doesn't stay buried. It leaks into everything. Even love. She wasn't trying to con us. At least not the way it looked at first. She needed people who wouldn't ask too many questions. Men who gave her a sense of structure, protection, normalcy, even if it was built on lies. When things got too close, when her world started overlapping, she ran. Again and again. And eventually, she ran out of road. That flash drive we found, the one she left in the motel, was her way of saying goodbye. And maybe, of warning us. I didn't lie to hurt you. I lied to survive. That line makes more sense now. She lived her life like a witness in her own trial. Always waiting to be caught. Always planning her next escape. She didn't trust anyone. Probably not even herself. And the sad truth? She might have been innocent all along. The fire could have been an accident. Could have been him, her father, in a final act of control. Or maybe it was her, backed into a corner, doing the only thing she thought could save her. We'll never know for sure. But here's what I do know. She wasn't built to live in one life. She fractured herself into versions. Masks. Scripts. And when she met me, when she met Daniel, maybe she wanted to be real again. But the past doesn't let go that easy. Eventually, someone came looking. Maybe law enforcement. Maybe someone worse. That's why she ran. One last time. And left the truth in a box in the woods. For the 2 men she lied to the most. The ones who, in different lives, she might have actually loved. Daniel and I still talk. Not often. But when we do, it's quiet. Like 2 war vets sitting with the same memory. We don't talk about her much anymore. Because what is there left to say? She was a storm. We were just the towns it passed through. And now that storm's gone. Leaving behind questions, a trail of names, and 2 men who'll never look at love the same way again.